They targeted a cadet after class. The Earthborn girl took out the squad and cleared the academy. The Nova Academy stood like a crystalline monument against the purple sky of Kepler 442b, its towers stretching toward the twin suns that cast everything in an ethereal golden glow. For 3 centuries, it had been the premier military training institution for the Galactic Coalition, producing the finest officers from across 7 star systems. Students from dozens of species walked its halls, learning the arts of warfare, diplomacy, and leadership that would shape the future of interstellar civilization. Maya Chun had never expected to be here. The 17-year-old human sat in the back row of advanced tactical analysis. Her dark eyes focused on Professor Vextar's holographic battlefield simulation. The Zelithian instructor's 4 arms moved with practiced precision as he manipulated the 3-dimensional display, showing the famous Battle of Rigel Prime where Coalition forces had broken the Vorthan siege. Notice how Admiral Krivak positioned his dreadnoughts. Vextar's translator rendered his clicking speech into standard galactic. The Vorthans expected a frontal assault, but the Coalition fleet used the asteroid field as cover for a flanking maneuver. Maya's hand shot up. Professor, what if they had used micro-jumps instead? The enemy sensors would have been disrupted by the gravitational anomalies near the pulsar. The classroom fell silent. Vextar's compound eyes rotated toward her, and Maya felt the familiar weight of dozens of stares. She was used to it by now. After 6 months at the academy, she had grown accustomed to being the only human in most of her classes. The primitive backworlder who somehow scored high enough on the entrance exams to earn a scholarship. An interesting theory, Cadet-chan, Vextar said slowly. However, human technology at the time lacked the precision required for such maneuvers. But sir, the Coalition ships had Zelithian navigation systems. Your people's jump drives could handle the calculations. Maya's voice remained steady despite the snickers from several Altarian students near the front. Vextar's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. You assumed the Zelithian crews would risk their ships based on human tactical suggestions. Remember, Cadet, Earth had only been part of the Coalition for 15 years at that point. The dismissal was polite but clear. Maya sank back in her chair, her jaw clenched. It was always the same. Her ideas were interesting or creative, but ultimately impractical. Her human perspective was a curiosity at best, a liability at worst. As the class ended and students filed out, Maya gathered her datapad and prepared to face another lonely walk to the dormitories. The academy's social hierarchy was as rigid as any military structure. The Altarians, with their blue-scaled skin and natural telepathic abilities, formed the elite tier. They had been part of the Coalition for over 2 millennia and considered themselves the natural leaders. Below them were the Zelithians, the technological masters whose innovations powered most Coalition systems. The Kefri, with their insectoid appearance and hive mind coordination, excelled in engineering and logistics. Various other species filled specialized niches. And then there were the humans, the newcomers, the primitives who had barely learned to travel between stars. When they stumbled into the greater galactic community. Maya was halfway across the academy's main courtyard. When she heard the footsteps behind her, she didn't need to turn around to know who they belonged to. Veltar Kreese, the son of a prominent Altarian admiral, led a group of cadets who seemed to take special pleasure in reminding her of her place. Cadet Chun, Veltar's voice carried the musical quality common to his species, but the tone was mocking. Still trying to rewrite military history, I see. Maya kept walking, her shoulders straight. The Academy's honor code prohibited physical confrontations between cadets, but that didn't stop psychological warfare. Just studying, Veltar. You should try it sometime. Oh, I have no doubt about your study habits, Veltar said, moving to block her path. 3 other cadets flanked him. Zaxton, a massive Kefri whose chitinous armor gleamed in the afternoon light. Niraval, another Altarian whose scales shimmered with barely contained telepathic energy. And Cordovan, a Zelithian whose 4 arms were folded in a gesture that clearly conveyed disdain. The question is whether all that studying will help when you're facing real combat, Veltar continued. Humans are fragile, slow, limited to single-threaded thinking. Perhaps you should consider transferring to the civilian administration track. I'm sure they need clerks. Maya's fists clenched at her sides, but she forced her voice to remain calm. The academy accepted me based on my scores, same as everyone else. If you have a problem with that, take it up with the admissions board. Scores, Cordovan S. Translator rendered his mechanical buzzing. Numbers on a screen? But this academy trains warriors, not test takers. When lives depend on split-second decisions, will your human limitations doom your squad mates? The group of cadets had drawn attention from other students. Maya could see them gathering at a safe distance, watching the confrontation with the morbid fascination typical of adolescence across any species. Some looked sympathetic, others merely curious, but none intervened. I've held my own in every simulation so far, Maya said. Simulations, Niraval laughed, the sound like crystal chimes. Controlled environments where everything goes according to schedule. Real combat is chaos, human. Your species hasn't fought a real war in 2 centuries. You've grown soft. Maya felt heat rising in her cheeks. It was true that Earth had been largely peaceful since joining the coalition. The protection of more advanced species meant that humans rarely faced existential threats anymore. But that didn't mean they were weak. Maybe you'd like to test that theory, she said quietly. Veltar's scaled features arranged themselves into what might have been a smile. What do you have in mind, Cadet Chin? Combat simulation. Full rules. Your squad against me. The suggestion drew gasps from the gathered crowd. 4-on-1 scenarios were technically within Academy regulations, but they were typically reserved for advanced training exercises where senior cadets tested themselves against overwhelming odds. For a first-year cadet to suggest it was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. You want to face 4 of us alone? Zaxton's voice was a low rumble that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his thorax. That would hardly be fair. You're right, Maya said. Maybe you should bring more friends. The insult hung in the air like a challenge banner. Veltar's eyes narrowed, and Maya could feel the telepathic pressure as he communicated silently with his companions. The Altarian ability to share thoughts instantly gave them a tremendous advantage in coordinated combat. Very well, Veltar said finally. Tomorrow evening, after regular training hours. Simulation Chamber 7. We'll see how well human stubbornness holds up against superior teamwork. As the group dispersed, Maya found herself standing alone in the courtyard. The other students had melted away, probably eager to spread word of the upcoming confrontation. She had just committed herself to facing 4 experienced cadets in single combat. Using equipment and tactics she had been learning for less than a year, she should have been terrified. Instead, she felt a strange calm settling over her. For months, she had endured the subtle discrimination, the constant reminders that she was an outsider, the assumption that humans were inherently inferior. Tomorrow night, she would have a chance to prove otherwise. Maya walked to her dormitory with purposeful strides. She had 24 hours to prepare for the most important fight of her life. As she passed under the Academy's motto, carved in elegant galactic standard above the main entrance, she couldn't help but smile grimly. Excellence through unity, the inscription read. Tomorrow night, she would show them what human excellence looked like standing alone. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Maya attended her regular classes, participated in training exercises, and maintained her normal routine, but her mind was constantly focused on the evening's challenge. Word of the confrontation had spread throughout the academy with the speed that only gossip could achieve. By lunchtime, it seemed like every cadet knew about the human who had challenged Veltar's squad. The reactions were mixed. Some cadets from the more peaceful species, like the Ethereals and the Harmonians, expressed concern about the violence implied in the challenge. Others, particularly those from warrior cultures, seemed excited about the prospect of seeing combat skills tested. The Coranti, a species known for their honor-based society, nodded approvingly when they saw Maya in the corridors, but it was the subtle changes in behavior that Maya noticed most. Conversation stopped when she entered a room. Instructors looked at her with expressions she couldn't quite read. Even her few acquaintances seemed unsure how to act around her during advanced combat theory. Professor Narvik, a grizzled Coranti veteran, called her to the front of the class to demonstrate a grappling technique. As she executed the move against the practice drone, she caught him studying her with intense yellow eyes. "Cadet Chun," he said as she returned to her seat. "A moment after class, please." When the other students had filed out, Professor Narvik gestured for Maya to approach his desk. The Coranti stood nearly 7 feet tall, his leopard-like features marked with the ritual scars that indicated his status A. They targeted a cadet after class. The Earthborn girl took out the squad and cleared the academy. News of Maya's victory spread through the academy like wildfire. By the next morning, every cadet, instructor, and support staff member had heard about the human who had single-handedly defeated one of the most elite squads in their year. The details grew more dramatic with each telling, but the core facts remained unchanged. Maya Chun had won an impossible fight through superior tactics and unconventional thinking. The immediate aftermath was stranger than Maya had expected. Instead of the respect she had hoped to earn, she found herself facing a different kind of isolation. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms, but now it was because cadets were studying her, trying to understand how she had achieved the impossible. Some looked at her with newfound respect, others with suspicion, and a few with something that might have been fear. Veltar and his squad avoided her completely. They attended their classes and training sessions with the same mechanical precision as before, but the arrogant confidence that had defined their behavior was gone. They had been publicly defeated by the species they considered inferior, and the psychological impact was devastating. 3 days after the simulation, Maya was summoned to the office of Academy Commandant Threlvex, an ancient ethereal whose translucent form seemed to shimmer with accumulated wisdom. The ethereals were among the oldest coalition species, philosophers and strategists who rarely involved themselves in direct military action but whose insights shaped policy. Across 7 star systems, the Commandant's office occupied the highest tower of the Academy, its panoramic windows offering a view of the entire training complex. Maya entered to find not just Threlvex, but also Professor Narvik and Dr. Yovara, the Academy's chief psychologist. The presence of multiple senior staff suggested this was more than a routine meeting. "Cadet Chun," Threlvex's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, the ethereal equivalent of speech translating directly into her mind. "Please be seated." Maya took the indicated chair, maintaining her military posture despite the informal tone. Years of human military tradition had taught her that the most dangerous conversations often began with false casualness. "Your recent performance has attracted considerable attention," Dr. Yovara said. The Vorthan psychologist's multiple eyes focused on Maya with uncomfortable intensity. "Not just here at the Academy, but throughout the Coalition military hierarchy." "I followed Academy regulations, ma'am," Maya replied carefully. "The simulation was conducted within established parameters." "Indeed," Professor Narvik rumbled approvingly, "which makes your victory all the more remarkable. Tell us, Cadet, where did you learn the tactics you employed?" Maya hesitated. The truth was that she had learned them from historical archives that most cadets ignored, studying the military campaigns of ancient Earth, but admitting that might reveal just how extensively she had researched unconventional warfare. "I studied every resource available in the Academy database, sir, including some of the older tactical manuals." "Older tactical manuals?" Threlvex repeated, and Maya could feel the ethereal's amusement like a warm glow. "You refer to the human military archives that we preserve for historical interest. Most cadets dismiss them as primitive. With respect, Commandant, most cadets have never had to fight from a position of disadvantage." The 3 instructors exchanged glances that Maya couldn't interpret. Dr. Yovara made notes on her datapad while Professor Narvek's scarred features arranged themselves into what she had learned was a Coranti expression of satisfaction. "Cadet Chun," Threlvex continued, "the Coalition has enjoyed 2 centuries of relative peace. Our military doctrine has evolved to emphasize cooperation between species, leveraging our individual strengths to create unified forces. It is effective against external threats, but perhaps limited in scope. Sir, recent intelligence suggests that we may face challenges that require different approaches, Dr. Yilvara said. Enemies who do not follow conventional coalition tactics. Your victory demonstrates capabilities that we had not fully appreciated. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. The carefully neutral language couldn't hide the implications. The coalition was facing some kind of threat that worried the Academy's senior staff enough to pay special attention to unconventional tactics. There is to be a special training exercise next month, Professor Narvik said. Selected cadets from across the Academy will participate in an extended simulation designed to test adaptive thinking and unconventional problem-solving. You will participate? It is not a request, Threlvex added, sensing Maya's hesitation. Your unique perspective has become strategically valuable. The Coalition needs officers who can think beyond established doctrine. As Maya left the meeting, her mind raced with questions. What kind of threat required tactics that the Coalition's combined wisdom couldn't handle? Why was her human perspective suddenly so important after centuries of being dismissed as primitive? She didn't have long to wonder. The next morning brought news that sent shockwaves through the Academy and beyond. A Coalition patrol fleet had encountered unknown vessels at the edge of the Vega system. First contact protocols had been followed, but the alien ships had responded with immediate violence, destroying 2 cruisers before disappearing into hyperspace, the Ravagers. As intelligence reports quickly dubbed them, seemed to operate with a level of tactical unpredictability that confounded Coalition strategists. They attacked without warning, used unconventional weapon systems, and employed hit-and-run tactics that prevented effective retaliation. Worse, they seemed to anticipate Coalition responses. As if they had studied their enemy's doctrine extensively, Maya watched the briefing recordings with growing unease. The Ravager ships moved like wolves, coordinating attacks that seemed random but achieved maximum psychological impact. They targeted supply lines instead of military installations, civilian transports instead of warships, communication relays instead of defensive platforms. It was asymmetric warfare on an interstellar scale. The special training exercise that had been scheduled for next month was moved up to the following week. Maya found herself assigned to a mixed squad that included cadets from across the Academy's social hierarchy. Kethver, a senior Altarian cadet whose telepathic abilities made him a natural leader. Zixtel, a Kefri engineer whose practical skills were legendary. Morden, a Koranti warrior whose combat scores were among the highest in Academy history. And Devara, an ethereal strategist whose analytical capabilities bordered on prescient. The team composition was clearly deliberate. Each cadet represented the elite of their species, the kind of future officers who would normally command their own units. Placing them under Maya's tactical leadership was either inspired leadership development or a recipe for disaster. Their first meeting took place in a secure briefing room deep within the Academy's administrative complex. Maya arrived to find her new squadmates already engaged in animated discussion about the Ravager threat and its implications for Coalition security. The pattern analysis is incomplete, Devara was saying, her ethereal form shimmering with concentration. But preliminary data suggests the Ravagers possess intimate knowledge of our tactical doctrine. They anticipate our responses with uncanny accuracy, which suggests either extensive observation or direct experience, Keffer added. They may be a Coalition species that has turned hostile, or they may have captured and interrogated our personnel. Or, Maya interjected as she took her seat, they may be fighting the same way we would if we were outnumbered and outgunned. The conversation stopped. 4 pairs of alien eyes focused on Maya with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Explain, Morden said simply. The Correnti's scarred features revealed nothing of his thoughts. Maya activated the room's holographic display and called up the tactical summaries of Ravager attacks. Look at the pattern. They avoid direct confrontation with superior forces. They target infrastructure instead of military assets. They attack supply lines to force resource allocation decisions. They hit civilian targets to create political pressure. She manipulated the display to highlight specific incidents. This isn't random violence or alien thinking. This is textbook asymmetric warfare. Someone is using our own historical tactics against us. Human historical tactics, Zixtal clarified. His mechanical translator rendering the Kefri's chittering with perfect precision. Yes, Maya admitted. The same approaches that Earth used to survive against more advanced opponents for most of our history. Devara's form pulsed with what Maya had learned indicated deep thought among ethereals. You believe the Ravagers have studied human military history. I think they've studied all our military history, Maya replied. But human doctrine is the only one that assumes you're going to be weaker than your enemy. Every other coalition species developed their tactics from positions of strength or rough parity. Humans learn to win by being smarter, not stronger. Kethver leaned forward, his blue-scaled features intent. If you're correct, then traditional coalition responses will be counterproductive. The Ravagers will anticipate every move we make. Worse than that, Maya said. They'll use our predictability against us. Every time we respond according to doctrine, we give. They targeted a cadet after class. The Earthborn girl took out the squad and cleared the academy 6 months later. Lieutenant Matichun stood on the bridge of the Coalition stealth frigate Shadowhawk, watching her tactical display with satisfaction. The Ravager fleet that had been terrorizing the Proxima trade routes was walking straight into her carefully prepared trap. Completely unaware that the roles of hunter and prey had been reversed, Special Tactical Unit Alpha had grown from an experimental concept to a force that was reshaping coalition military doctrine across 3 star systems. The unit now included 47 officers from 12 different species, all trained in what military historians were already calling Chun Doctrine, the systematic application of asymmetric warfare principles to conventional military operations. The irony wasn't lost on Maya that the tactics being labeled revolutionary were older than human spaceflight. Guerrilla warfare, deception operations, and psychological manipulation had been part of human military thinking for millennia. What was new was applying them on an interstellar scale against enemies who had grown complacent with centuries of predictable warfare. Target acquisition confirmed, reported Zixtal from the sensor station. The Kefri engineer had been among the first volunteers for Special Tactical Unit Alpha, his natural coordination abilities making him perfect for the complex timing required by Maya's operations. Ravager fleet maintaining course and speed toward the Tau Ceti system. Excellent, Maya said quietly. Signal the hunter groups. Phase 1 is go. What the Ravagers saw on their sensors was a desperate evacuation convoy fleeing the Tau Ceti colonies ahead of their advance. 17 civilian transports escorted by a single outdated cruiser, running at maximum speed toward the relative safety of the Proxima system. It was exactly the kind of target the Ravagers had been hitting for months, valuable, lightly defended, and psychologically devastating to Coalition morale. What they didn't see were the 6 Coalition destroyers hiding in the shadow of Tau Ceti's asteroid belt, or the squad of fighters concealed in the debris field left over from the system's last mining operation. They certainly didn't realize that the civilian transports were actually modified military vessels carrying enough firepower to level a small moon. Maya had learned the effectiveness of misdirection during her first training exercise, but she had refined it into an art form over the past months. The key was giving the enemy exactly what they expected to see while hiding what they didn't think to look for. Hunter Group Alpha is in position, came Kethver's voice over the tactical network. The former Academy rival had become one of Maya's most trusted squadron leaders, his Altarian telepathic abilities making him perfect for coordinating complex multi-unit operations. Hunter Group Beta reports ready. Hunter Group Gamma is holding position at nav point 7. Maya nodded, watching the Ravager fleet's approach vector with the patience of a spider in her web. The enemy commander was good, probably the best the Ravagers had produced so far. He was approaching from multiple vectors, using his numerical advantage to prevent the convoy from escaping, while minimizing his own exposure to defensive fire. It was exactly what Coalition tactical doctrine would predict. It was also exactly what Maya was counting on. Range to target? She asked. 15,000 kilometers in closing, Zixtel replied. They should be within weapons range in 47 seconds. Signal all units, Maya ordered. Weapons free in 30 seconds. Remember, we want prisoners if possible. Intelligence needs to know where they're getting their information about our tactical doctrine. The Ravager fleet began its attack run with the confidence of predators that had never encountered effective resistance. Their lead ships opened fire on the convoy's escort cruiser, expecting the same quick victory they had achieved in dozens of previous engagements. Instead, the outdated cruiser revealed itself to be the Retribution, one of the Coalition's newest heavy destroyers disguised with holographic projectors and false sensor signatures. The massive ship's real weapons came online all at once, turning the laid Ravager vessel into expanding plasma in less than 3 seconds. That got their attention, Morden rumbled from the weapons console. The Coranti warrior had taken to human tactical doctrine with enthusiasm that sometimes worried Maya, his natural aggression, channeled through careful planning and misdirection, had made him devastatingly effective against enemies who expected civilized warfare. The Ravager fleet tried to disengage, but Maya's hunter groups were already moving. The Coalition destroyers broke cover from the asteroid belt, cutting off the enemy's retreat while the fighter squadrons emerged from the debris field to attack the Ravager flanks. In less than 2 minutes, the scattered enemy fleet found itself surrounded and outnumbered. The battle that followed was more execution than engagement. Ravager ships that tried to fight found themselves facing overwhelming firepower from multiple directions. Those that attempted to escape ran into carefully positioned ambush that had been waiting for exactly that response. Within 15 minutes, 11 Ravager vessels had been destroyed or disabled, with only 3 managing to escape into hyperspace. Damage report. Maya ordered as the tactical display showed the last enemy ships fleeing the system. Minimal casualties across all units, Kethver reported. Hunter Group Beta sustained some minor hull damage, but nothing that will affect operations. We're showing green across the board. Maya allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. It was the kind of overwhelming victory that the Coalition hadn't achieved against the Ravagers since the conflict began. More importantly, it had been achieved using tactics that turned the enemy's own predictability against them. But the real victory came with the intelligence extracted from the captured Ravager crew members. Under interrogation, they revealed something that sent shockwaves through Coalition command structure all the way back to the capital worlds of Alpha Centauri. The Ravagers weren't aliens at all. They were exiled Coalition citizens, members of various species who had been cast out for criminal behavior, political dissent, or military insubordination. They had banded together in the outer systems, building a fleet from stolen ships and salvaged equipment. Their intimate knowledge of Coalition tactics came from the fact that they had once been part of the very military they were now fighting. The revelation changed everything. The Coalition wasn't facing an external threat that could be negotiated with or contained. They were dealing with internal enemies who knew every weakness in their society and military structure. Worse, the exile communities had been growing for decades. Fed by dissidents and criminals who had nowhere else to go, Maya found herself summoned to a strategic planning session at Coalition High Command on New Geneva, the administrative capital of the Inner Systems. The chamber where she presented her findings was filled with the highest-ranking military officers from across 7 star systems, including Fleet Admiral Velther, the Altarian who commanded all Coalition forces. Lieutenant Chun, Admiral Velther said after Maya had finished her briefing, your tactical innovations have proven effective against the immediate Ravager threat. But this new intelligence suggests a much larger problem. If the exile communities continue to grow, we could be facing a full-scale civil war. Maya stood at attention before the assembled officers, acutely aware that she was the youngest and lowest-ranking person in the room. 6 months ago, she had been a cadet struggling to prove she belonged at the academy. Now she was being asked to provide strategic recommendations for the defense of interstellar civilization. "Sir," she said carefully, "the Ravager tactics work because they exploit weaknesses in our social and military structure. They know we'll follow protocols even when those protocols are counterproductive. They know we'll try to minimize civilian casualties even when ruthless action would be more effective. They know we'll attempt to negotiate even with enemies who have no intention of honoring agreements." "And your recommendation?" asked General Faxvan, a massive Coranti whose battle scars spoke of decades of military service. "We need to change our entire approach to internal security," Maya replied. "The exile communities exist because we've been treating dissidents and criminals as external problems. We exile them instead of dealing with them, then act surprised when they become organized threats." The suggestion caused a stir among the assembled officers. The coalition's approach to criminal justice had been based on rehabilitation and exile for over 2 centuries. Maya was essentially recommending that they abandon one of their core social principles. "You're talking about fundamental changes to coalition society," Admiral Velther said. "The political implications would be enormous." "Sir, the alternative is losing the war," Maya said bluntly. "The Ravagers are just the beginning. If we don't address the underlying problems that created them, we'll face the same threat again and again. Each time, they'll be better organized and more dangerous." Fleet Admiral Corvash, an ancient ethereal whose form seemed to shimmer with accumulated wisdom, spoke for the first time during the session. "Lieutenant Chun, what you propose would require the coalition to become something it has never been, a society that acknowledges the necessity of internal conflict. Are you prepared for the consequences of such a